and we shall start. Okay, so what we're going to go over today is we are going to probably finish chapter 1. I have some sticky notes of some things I want to go over that I skipped on accident. We're going to go over the code you guys were supposed to write and finish. I'm sure you guys have questions as to what it is. And we're going to go through all that, and then we'll see how much time is left. And there may just be some in-class write code that does these things. So first thing, before we even get to the program that you guys wrote, I want to go over a couple mathematical operations that I skipped. So what is this? What is that? It's addition. We have Did we go over that one? Exponents. Good. Did we go over this one?
Yes. No. Yeah, we did. Fraction.
What does this one mean?
Isn't that a square root?
No. So here we go. 5 divided by 2 gives us 2.5. 5 divided by double sign gives us 2. So what do you think it does?
I don't know.
Well, what's the difference between those two answers?
Oh, it's not a float.
It's not a float, it's an integer, so what it does is it just gives you the whole number. It gets rid of any decimal.
Even if it's like 2.9, it'll just round down to 2.
Yeah, so if we did 29 divided by 10, gets rid of the decimal period, regardless. Doesn't matter what it is. It's called integer division. And then this next one is very, very useful. How do you know whether or not a number is even or odd?
The last number.
What about the last number?
Even or odd.
No.
No, you divide by 2.
You divide it by 2. Who said that? So yeah, if it's divisible by 2, it's even. If it's not divisible by 2, it's odd, right? So 4 divided by 2, that doesn't work. But 4, if you do percent sign 2, gives us a 0. What this means is that 2 going into 4 has 0 remainders. It's a remainder division. Or I actually don't, what's the term in the book? It get the modulus or remainder. So 22 divided by percent sign 10 is going to give us what? 10 goes into 22 how many times? With how many left over? So our answer is going to be, yep. So you can use this. We definitely use this later on in class, so you guys need to memorize this. To determine whether or not something's odd or even. So 4 divided by 2 percent sign is going to be 0. 5% sign 2 is going to be 1. So if the number divided by 2 is 1, it's what? If the number that the user types in, if you divide that by 2 and the remainder is 1, what does that mean about the number? It's an odd number, and if that number is 0, it means it's an even number. Yes. Now, a student in the previous class said you can use this to make sure that if something happens every 3 frames. So in our video game, you could have something happen every 10 frames if you're counting the frames that you go through. And so you could basically do let's start at 1 this time. Actually, every 3 frames I always forget I need to do that. Does that make sense to you? Right, you guys can ignore most of this, but this part right here, x is our number, whatever it is. If you divide it by 3 and that equals 0, what does that mean? That number is a multiple of
Trace.
3. Yes. So you can use this to every time or every 5 or every 10 or every 15 frames or every blank, I want the code to do something. We're going to go over this next in the next chapter, so you can kind of ignore all that. But do you guys understand what the remainder division does? So if I were to type in, what's this answer? Who thinks it's 2? I got one person over here. 2. Catherine, why do you say it's 2?
It's a remainder, so 6 times 9 is 54, and then 6 to it.
Yep. Great job. Does everyone get that?
No.
No? Okay.
I don't think so.
So, what's 56 divided by 9 is what? Give me the whole number. 6.22222. All right? So, what is 9 times 6? 56 minus 54 is what? 2. That's how we get 2. Does that make sense when I did it that way?
Yeah.
Who still doesn't get it? I'm sure at least one of you guys. Probably. No? Everyone good? Mikey, you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Can
Stockton?
we get another example just to justify what I'm thinking?
Yeah. So 76% sine 25. What's going to be the answer?
Hold on, I think you can calculator.
One.
Walk us through it, David.
So basically, something divided by 25 is going to be 3.1, the remainder of this one.
Oh, word. Oh,
Does that make sense now, Mikey?
yeah.
So you basically have to find out how many times does this number go into that number. 25 goes into 76 3 times.
And if it was 4 divided by 2, it'd be 0.
Yes.
That makes sense.
And if I were to do, what's this answer, Mikey?
Oh, that's like 24.
Perfect. You got it. Awesome. So that's the modulus or the remainder division. We're going to use that one quite often, so I wouldn't forget that. Okay, so we're going to start with our code. Uh-oh. Let me pull it up real quick. I don't know why it wasn't there. All right, so one thing that you guys were asking about is someone double-clicked it and it didn't work. Right, when you double-click it, this is what pops up, and then it disappears. Does that happen to people? I know it happened to David. Who else did it happen to? Wow, you guys didn't run your program after you wrote it. So what you need to do in order to open and edit the code that we've already written, if you just double-click on it, it runs that program. It doesn't allow you to edit it. So what you need to do is you right-click, and you have to go edit with idle.
Oh, yeah.
Then what it'll do is it will open it up like this. And now you guys can edit your code. Does that make sense? Ezra?
I just opened like idle and then went to file.
That works too. Yeah. Just, that works. Okay, so I'm going to go over this, and as I go through it, I'm going to explain it, and then I'm going to answer your guys' questions, okay? Cool. Can't wait till we're a little further in the book, and I can...
I felt that last night.
There we go. Okay. So it's good to meet you. Oh, it's good to meet you, computer. So the print. So did you guys notice what I did there? So if I type print, I just instantly did open close parentheses, and then I know I'm doing just strings, and then I did that. As opposed to going print the length of your name is, and then just having to remember to end it. If I just print yes.
What's the colon for again?
So it looks pretty. That's it. So the length of your name is print the length of my name. So what, did anyone read the book and find out what length does, or were you able to figure it out just by seeing what it did?
The letters of
Yeah, well, let Brendan raise his hand. What's up?
So basically, it takes your, like the input that you gave for your name or my name, and it counts like the characters in it.
That's exactly it. Length will give you the number of things in another thing, depending on what it is. So in a string, it gives you the number of characters in that string. So if I type in Zach, how many characters are in Zach? So my length is going to be 4. If I type in Zach with a space at the end, how many characters are in there? 5. Spaces count as characters. That's going to be really important when we do more string manipulation if we get there. Spaces count as characters. Yes.
Can you, like, is there a way to remove the space from the end of the word? So, like,
Yes.
someone accidentally types in, like, Peter space.
Yep.
Space.
Yeah, we'll get to that in the string manipulation chapter if we get to it. But yes, there's totally a way to do it. It's called strip. L strip and R strip. You strip from the left, you strip from the right. Ezra.
What did they use to code Python? Like, how did they code Python to code?
It's a great question.
It's kind of
So there's like, well, inside of Windows, you have different languages that work. So Windows is built on, I think, a .NET framework. I don't know though. And it's a great question. I don't really 100% know.
Also, how did they code the first code program? I guess it's running through my head right now.
That's a great question. Everything goes back to the logic gates. So they basically were able to figure out that if electron goes through here, do this thing. If it doesn't, do this thing. How they did that, I'm not 100% sure. So you'd have to look that up. That'd be a really cool. That'd be really what?
Probably
God created the first code.
God created the first code. Well, he created man, who created the first code. So, all right. So length of my name, print. What is your age? Now you guys all should have done this already, so this should just be a little bit review. If you didn't, this is time for you to catch up. Exactly, so it should already be done. Yes, Catherine.
you have to type in like the red
Yeah.
word.
You don't have to. I'm just copying it from the book. So, Peter.
Can we use different variable names?
You could, it would work the same.
Yeah.
Like my age and my name.
Your variable.
It's like my name doesn't make any sense because it could be anyone who's using the program.
Whoa.
So I just
You would
use
say
my
man.
name.
I don't care as long as it works.
Okay.
If you're copying it from the book, it might be harder and make it more difficult the further we go, but that's for you to deal with, not me. If your code doesn't work when it gets to me, then yeah, that's on you. David.
So what if, let's say, after, like, you type in your name, it, like, shows you the length of your name is 5. What if I want to make it, like, 5 letters? Is there a way of, like,
If you want to make what 5 letters?
if I want to have the word letters after 5.
Oh, I'll show you how you do that.
When you do like another plus on the letters,
Well, you could do print. You could do this. But I'm going to show you in a second how to add stuff together and how to concatenate strings and stuff in print, because you can print more than just one thing at a time. As you can see here, I'm printing my name and this, but I'm concatenating the strings. But I'm gonna get more into this in a sec. Let's just get through this. My age is an input print. You will be plus str int my age plus 1 plus all right. What is my name? Oop, I forgot to put a space here.
oh no, silly.
In the beginning of the class, you won't lose points. And you probably won't lose many points even at the end of the class. In the advanced class, you'll lose points for stuff like this. So you want to make sure you always double check your
I
code.
remember fixing that.
And I don't like how it said like the 7 under the length of your name. How can you fix that?
I will show you. So what I want to go over real quick, all right, you guys understand comments, right?
Yes.
Do you have any questions on comments? No. Do you have any questions on how to print a string by itself? Or concerns? Yes, Catherine.
What does str do?
I'm going to get to that. So you guys have no problem. If I were to say print any string, you guys would feel okay with that.
Oh yeah, that's easy.
Okay, I'm glad one person is confident. Yes? Okay. If I were to ask you to create a variable that the user types in, would you feel comfortable doing that?
Yes. Oh, word, yeah.
Any variable equals input. Does that confuse anyone?
Not quite.
Not quite.
Not really.
You want me? No, not really.
Excuse me, I gotta remember it.
We're gonna do more with it. So if it's confusing you now, speak up.
Yeah, it doesn't confuse me, it'll just take time to remember it. I'll be
Yeah.
like, wait, what is it again? Oh yeah, it's
Yeah. Okay.
totally understand that.
Do you guys have any issues with this? This is one step above printing just a regular string by itself. We're concatenating strings inside of print.
Yeah.
So it's just like we're doing that, but we're printing that.
That's so weird.
Do you guys have questions on this?
No.
All right, no questions. We've already gone over that.
Oh. No, it like clicked like the final click.
The final click, there we go. Do you guys understand what length does and how it works? Who does not?
It doesn't take
Sonny.
the-
You don't understand, okay. So currently, when I type in my name, right, we're gonna assume assume the user always types in Zach. If we type in Zach, what is the length of that variable? How many characters make up this word? 4. So that's what this becomes. So this is a function that counts how many letters are in the string and then displays that information. That's all it is. You can also have lengths of other things. Once we learn lists, you learn how many objects are in a list, and it's not letters in a word, it's things on a list. Does that make sense? But for now, all it does is it counts the the number of letters in a string. You good? Anyone else? Does that make sense to everyone? Sweet. We've already gone over that. What is your age? We have input. Now this is the part I want to go over because I had a couple people, I'm sure, get an error like this. Who got this error? Ezra?
Ooh.
Really? I am surprised. Okay, more than one. What this is saying, EOF means end of file, right? See how this red thing right here is at the very end of the file? That means something is preventing Python from understanding that the file is over. So for example, if I were to say, if I were to look at one of you and go, how are, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes. I'd be like error.
What am I trying to say?
How are
You don't know that.
I can do that.
We don't assume.
So I don't know.
You don't know.
I don't know.
How is, what am I trying to say? What am I talking about?
I don't know.
There you go. No one knows, right? So that's what's happening right here. Your computer, Python is going, I have this thing I need to display, and I don't know if everything is there that I need to display. So typically, most of your errors at the beginning are going to be mistakes in parentheses. You can also have this
Yeah, I forgot to close the.
EOL means end of line, meaning your line isn't over. And you can see this parenthesis is green. Do we want our parentheses to be green?
No.
So while scanning string literal, meaning you didn't complete your string goes on forever, but forever runs into the end of a line and then the end of the file. So you just need to go back and add that. So those are probably going to be the two biggest errors that you're going to have. Now I want to go over two different types of errors. You have logic errors and you have syntax errors. Logic errors are
This doesn't add up.
right, it doesn't make sense. Or x equals y, but y can't equal x because of this. Or it's like saying, because Josh is drinking, he's going to be in the NBA.
Yeah.
Like, what? No, that doesn't logically make sense. Or, but then we also have the other errors where we use the wrong punctuation. Does that make sense? A syntax error is there's something grammatically wrong with your code. A logic error is something doesn't make sense. And so the way your code works is that it runs through this code once and checks to see if there's syntax errors. Notice that when I do this, it doesn't load the shell at all because I have an error. But if I were to say, a logic error. So if we did what is your name? Zach. I'm not really 30, but wait, what? That's a logic error. That doesn't make sense. Like, I'm going to be 3 in a year and I'm 30. Something's not right.
Something's not right.
Exactly. Although length of my age, integers, that should be, it should have been 5, but does that make sense? The difference between the two types of errors? One physically breaks your code. You can't use it. And 2 is you have a logic error. There's one other, like, it's not really a logic, it's just an error. Okay. So logically, I'm good, right? I don't have any errors. It doesn't logically not make sense. And I don't have any syntax errors. I haven't written anything wrong. I haven't put a parentheses where it should be a comma or a period where there should be an apostrophe. I haven't done any of that. So logically my code works, and syntactically my code works. But I get another, this is an exception or an error. This is saying you have a variable that you are doing something to that you haven't defined. When we define a variable, we create it and we declare blank is blank. X equals 4. That sort of stuff. Does that make sense? Any questions so far? Was that my computer that just made that noise?
No.
Was it yours?
Yes. I was pinged by Robert.
I'm not lying. I have had to disable the Wi-Fi for my entire class because they mess around during class. That is something I can do very quickly, and while you're in my class, you won't have Wi-Fi. Just saying. I've done it in the past. I don't like to, but if I feel you guys aren't paying attention, or you're on YouTube, or you're getting pinged by people, I will disable Wi-Fi for you guys.
Can you explain how you do that?
No. Take the computer networking class and you'll understand.
Can you explain how to like fix that if you do that? for us?
No. There's nothing you can do to fix. Well, I won't say
There are-
nothing, but
Can you tell us if that's
no.
a function that you can perform on Python?
No.
This is what I want.
Catherine.
I
What
doubt
is the
it, but I was
difference between a type error and a logic error?
disable Wi-Fi.
So a logic error is your code works, it just doesn't make sense. You're comparing two things that don't work, or it just there's not anything wrong with it. Your code runs. It just doesn't make sense. That's probably the best way I can describe it. I'm trying to think of an example. So yeah, I guess the closest thing I can do is this is a logic error, more or less. I will be 31 in 10 years. So I've either made a mistake with adding information to 30, or I've made a mistake in displaying the information. So again, my code works and nothing's broken, it just doesn't make sense. Something's up. So you would either need to make that a 10, or you need to go and change it like that, like we did in the example. So to fix this error, a name error, you're probably going to get this a lot. What this is saying is that a variable you are trying to do something with has not been defined. Can you cook a chicken that you don't have?
No, that does not. Sometimes.
Sometimes.
But
Can you raise your kid if you don't have a child?
yeah.
No, you can't, Ezra.
I know what you mean. I know.
No. The
Stop.
answer is
No.
no.
Can you have something that hasn't been created?
No.
No, not really. No.
Right? So can you add a number to something that doesn't exist?
No, of course not.
Okay. And don't get all super mathematical on me, people.
I said, well,
Don't get into that, Mikey. I know you. Actually,
no way, no
anyway.
way.
So that's what this is saying you have a variable, my age, that hasn't been defined. And what that means is odds are you've mistyped, you have a typo. You misspelled a variable. That's the most common thing. And that's why my age is, I have this lowercase because odds are it's going to be a simple typo. And so what you'll need to do is, this tells you what line you have the error in. Right? It says the file, this is the file we're working in. In line 12, this is the line. This is line 12 right here. This is the error in that line. So what you can do, if you look down here, you see this line. This is columns. That's probably the 37th item. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which you really don't need to know column. But this line, I find line 12, and I know this is the line I'm having the error in. When you have a lot longer of code, this is really important, really useful, so I'd pay attention. If you hit Alt G, this will go to a line. It'll go to the beginning of whatever line you type in. So that's useful when you're in line 47 or 118. You just go Alt G 119.
I don't even think I could type that. Or
You could, you will. So, how do you guys feel about that? Do you have any questions?
I do.
All right, Mikey and then Peter.
So in this class, they're going to be like doing data there where we already have what we have to write, or we're going to have to do some problem solving.
We're gonna do some problem solving.
Okay, I'll do that this week.
Yeah, you'll have some homework this week. Peter.
Is it possible to have the line numbers come up on the left-hand side of the screen?
Not that I know of. Oh, that was easy. So you go to options and show line numbers.
Oh,
That's
convenient.
That is very convenient. I'm gonna leave those there. Okay, so we've gone over comments, we've gone over print, we've gone over length. Okay, so we can now, I want to go over going between, so far, are there any questions? No? Okay. So what we're going to do now is you can take a number. I'm going to jump over to the shell because this is a little easier for me. Just to show. We have int, float, and string. These three commands allow us to manipulate numbers and strings and make them into different data types. So if I have, right, I have a string of 1, 2, 3. That's just a string of 1, 2, 3. I can type int before it. And what that will do is it changes it into a number. So if I were to do 1, 2, 3 plus 4, 5, 6, what should the answer be, Josh?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yep, just a string of those 6 numbers. If I type in int, what's this number? 579? Yep. Because it's taking the integer version of this, adding it to the integer version of this, and then displaying the integer answer. Yes?
If you do float, parentheses 10, would that make it like 10.0 or whatever that is?
Yes, it would.
Okay.
If I have 123.5, and I type in int, what do you guys think it's going to be? It's going to get rid of the 5. Yep, that's exactly right. If I have, if I do this, we get the decimal. Now, if I want to integerize a string, what do you think is going to happen? Value error, but an error. And what this value error means is you can't integerize something that's not a number, is what this is saying. Is the word string a number?
no.
What if I do int ah! 41 is a number, right?
In number form, it's a number.
Exactly. So we would have to int, but isn't that already a number? Isn't 41 an integer?
Yeah.
Are we going to get an error? No. Integerizing an integer is fine.
Wait, what?
Integer squared.
No, not an integer squared. What, Josh?
No, I said nothing.
No? Do you guys understand this? Do you have questions on it? Mikey?
If x is not defined, you put x equals x, what will happen?
Not defined. Now, one thing that I want to put in your guys' head right now is I can have math going on in here. So let's actually do float. 125 minus 60, whatever. Does that make sense? If I have x is 90 and y is 100, I can go x plus y and get 190. Ezra.
Can I just go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna have break shortly, so.
Oh, okay.
Does anyone have questions on that? No? I can do this. It will all of these numbers are integers. It adds them together, gets 480, and then makes it an integer. Or, I'm sorry, makes it a float. Peter.
Can you convert straight from a string into a float?
At least I think, actually. Yeah, okay. At one point, I think you couldn't do that, but I can't remember why, or if I'm just misremembering. Yes, so if they type in, so let's do money equals input, and let's say they make 1250. Money is now a string that's 1250, and I can go float money. Now I can go times, what do you make in an 8-hour shift? Make $100. Does that make sense? What? Yeah, this shell can be is a pretty good calculator. What questions do you guys have? I'm sure there's at least one of you with a question. Nasio. Mikey.
We have lunch after this period.
Yes. I'll rephrase that. Do you guys have any questions pertaining to in like an hour and 15 minutes? Wait, 11?
In 55 minutes.
55 minutes.
Yeah.
It's already been 30 minutes.
No, we don't have 40 time flat back.
Thank you.
We can take longer.
All right. Is that it?
We don't have enough.
Right? Because this is going to be part of your homework. Is being able to switch stuff in between floats and integers. What?
Do we have homework day?
Yes. You'll have some homework. Because you got 2 days to do it until Friday. So if I don't get you guys homework now, then it's like, well.
It's so strange for homework because then we get homework Thursday for our second block. And
They always
you know,
make you
it's
do
not
things all the way till Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty
Then
much.
on Wednesday night, we actually have to do everything. Yeah, because
Yeah, that's crazy. You have 4, 5, 6, 7 2 days in a row. I do not envy those teachers.
College algebra, she wants it like done. We do the day in class and go over it.
Yeah. Okay. If you guys have questions, I can integerize a float. I can floaterize an int. I can integerize a string. And I can floaterize. I can do all sorts of stuff. Make sense?
Is that all the combination?
Well, you can string. Oh, I didn't go over str. You can stringerize integers or floats. So I can str.
Oh, word.
And it just makes it a string. So it does the math, makes the whole thing a string. This is cool because if I'm printing something,
we just used this, right?
you did. This was in your homework. Yes, I can add a string of a number. Oops. Oops. Ah! Right, whereas if I don't have this string, what happens?
Oh.
We get you can't concatenate a string and an integer.
So if you once you enter, like in our code, once you integerize my age, does it permanently become an integer?
It's temporary.
So you have to do int my age every time.
So what you would have to do, so if age is 15, you could integerize age, or you can do age equals int of age. Now age will always be 15, as opposed to, as opposed to being a string. Does that make sense? Yes, Catherine.
I have a value pair.
Yep.
And a valid zero. What's that mean?
Say that again.
I have a value error. Because I have int and then put a float inside of like the string.
So you have int
And then
like this.
no, I just had the
Like that?
yeah.
Oh, but it's a string?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you can't, this must have been what it was. You can't take a string into a float into an integer. You'd have to do, this is the one, you'd have to do that. You can't jump to, apparently you can't integerize a string float, or a float that, or a string that's a float. Yeah. Right? So think of it as a step, right? I can have, okay, so if I can't integerize that, okay, here's my whiteboard. I'm going to use this later. So we have, you guys can see that, right? So we have an int to a float to a string. So this is, and oh gosh, it's so hard to explain. So I can go from an integer to a float, no problem, right? Float, you can float a string float. I can integerize back and forth to a float, back and forth to an int float. Do you guys get the difference between a string float and an int float? Actually, haha, I love this whiteboard. Do you guys see the difference between these two?
Yes.
This has the decimal, so it's a float. This doesn't, so this is an int. This is a float. But it's still a string. So you can't go, you can do this, but you cannot do this.
Oh, that's not cool.
Wait, what? I am so. Oh.
Because and I don't know why Python can't see that you have a string float and just integerize it, but integer has to have either a float number or an integer float. It can have a float, but it can't have a string float. I don't know why. That's just a limitation, Catherine.
So you mean by int float? It's an integer, but it's also a float.
Oh,
Maybe like it's
this should be, okay, just time's out. I screwed up. That should be string int. That was a typo. Does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe so. I wasn't expecting this question, so I don't have any like, this is how you do it. This is all off the cuff.
That's really strange.
Isn't it? Oh wait, the fact that I don't have an answer, or the fact that you can't do it?
The fact that you can't do it.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's that hard for them to code this, but they haven't, so
Is there a module that you can get that allows you
probably you could also probably write your own. So, but
Maybe in Python 4.
maybe.
They're gonna update it.
How do I get rid of these? Garbage.
They update Python regularly.
Yeah, don't use 2.7. That's legacy.
Yeah, I'm gonna get rid of that.
Okay, so I'm gonna do this and then we're gonna have a break. Okay. Now, real quick, I want to break this down. So I can't get it out of this font. I don't like this font, but this is what we're gonna have to deal with it. Okay. So if my age equals, give me a number, someone. 17. So my age is 17 because it's an input. All inputs by default are strings. Does that make sense? So if we have, so back to our code, this right here is a string. Does that make sense? Input by default makes that variable a string. Tracking with me? Okay. Oops. So if this is a string, what does my age here, what is it? It's a string, 17. Okay? Now we're done with this, right? We're working from in out, right? Like in math. Parentheses first. So once we've got that, that's 17. So we're integerizing 17. What does that make 17? The 17 is an integer, so I'm going to write it as black, okay? Now we have integer of that. So now this right here, actually, hang on, I'm going to do it this way. That is 17. Once we integerize it, this is now 17. So now we have 17 plus 1, which gives us 17 plus 1. Anyone? 18. So this is now 18. And this is also in your book, right? So this is 18. So now we're stringifying it. So what does 18 become? What should I write? 18 is a string. And now we have you will be plus 18 plus in a year. Does that make sense? And then it will print all this. Does that make sense? How we broke something with a bunch of parentheses and we broke it up into parts and how it changes? So don't be afraid to do stuff like this. This string and integer thing, you can have functions inside of functions. You can have variables inside of a function inside of a function. That's what these are. If it turns purple, it's a function, so that's what I'm going to call them. Does that make sense to you guys? As long as whatever, I don't like that the shapes don't disappear either. So my age, so you can have a variable inside of a function inside of another function. As long as whatever this is, whatever's in the parentheses, conforms to what this has to be. I know that sounds a little confusing, but if I were to type my age as 3.14, would this break my code? Why do you say yes, Catherine? It's a string float, and you can't have a string float here. So let's try that. Let's go to our code. Let's run it. And if I type Zach, what is your age? 3.14. I break the code. So, does that make sense? The reason we break the code is because integer cannot integerize 3.14. Peter.
So then to fix that, could you float that first and then integerize it?
Yep. Or you could integerize the input. We're going to get to that after the break. So you guys can go take a...
Wait, hold on.
Hang on, I'm going to stop the video, but if you have a question, I can answer it.
Because I was gonna say you can basically make it like impossible for someone to break your code that way because if they put in like a bunch of characters, like it'll take that amount of characters and put that number in, or maybe it'll you know, if you do like float, I don't know, convert it to integer.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we want to be, as coders, you gotta kind of have to view your code and try to break it yourself. So like if I were trying to break the code, what would I do to break it? And you have to code for those eventualities. So that happens more in the advanced class. But I'm gonna pause the video and we'll be back shortly. So I stopped recording on accident. I forgot to hit unpause. So briefly what we've gone over is essentially you can have, instead of my age is an input and then integerizing that input, you can integerize the input when you define the variable. So this is your input. Inputs are normally strings. You can then integerize it then and there. And then for the rest of the time, my age is an int as opposed to, by default, a string, because input, as we know, hopefully, is always a string. So if we go age input, we can see here that age input, if you type in a number, it's always going to be a string. If you add an int in front of the input, you get an integer. It is useful to always have float in front of your input, which allows people to type in decimals. If you have integer, you will get this value error. So it is very useful to start with float because you can then change it to other things. Integer, you can integerize the age to get the age and that sort of thing. So if you have questions on that, message me. But that's it. I'm going to get you guys to use your homework in just a second. So have a good one.